Coming up on our newscast tonight. The two Koreas agreed to formally inform the International Olympic Committee of their intention to co-host the 2032 Summer Games. Other outcomes of their latest sports talk include hashing out details on other areas of cooperation. Seoul and Pyongyang exchange information on foreign boats illegally fishing near the northern limit line for the first time in 10 years. It's also the first such communication since the two Koreas announced ceasing all hostile cross-border acts. At a financial council meeting, the nation's central banker points out South Korea may face increased financial market volatility. Israel vows to closely monitor the financial situation in foreign countries and, if necessary, cooperate with the central government. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Che. Delegations of Seoul and Pyongyang met at the Joint Liaison Office north of the inter-Korean border to discuss sports exchanges. They've decided to field joint teams for upcoming international sports event and to co-host the Summer Olympics in 2032. Woo Jung-hee starts us off.
Just as agreed by the leaders at the September summit, South and North Korea are launching a joint bid to host the Olympic Games. Delegations from Seoul and Pyongyang met at the Joint Liaison Office in North Korea's border town of Kaesong on Friday for sports talks, with vice sports ministers leading the delegations. They've agreed to tell the International Olympic Committee together of their intent to co-host the Summer Olympics in 2032. In the details of that, they say, will be worked on through the Joint Liaison Office, where officials of each side stay and communicate 24/7. The two Koreas also decided to field joint teams for upcoming international sports events, namely next year's Men's World Handball Championship and the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. They'll be starting consultations with the IOC and related organizations. South and North Korea also promised to take part in international sporting events hosted by the other and to continue exchanges like friendly matches in various sports. It is not an exaggeration to say that inter-Korean sports exchanges have been at the forefront of the peace mood on the Korean peninsula this year. The dialogue momentum began when North Korea decided to participate in Pyeongchang Winter Olympics and Paralympics earlier this year. And sports exchanges continued as Seoul and Pyongyang held inter-Korean basketball-friendly matches in Pyongyang for the first time in 13 years, and North Korean athletes came down to the south to take part in international table tennis and shooting competitions. With the new action plans set out through Friday's sports talks and the Joint Contact Office in operation in full swing, sports diplomacy between the two Koreas is set to keep blooming. Woo Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Also, after holding talks today, World Taekwondo from South Korea and the International Taekwondo Federation from the North have signed an agreement to establish a joint organization for their integration and the development of the traditional Korean martial art. According to the two sides, the name of the organization and its goals will be decided during their meeting in December. They also saw eye to eye on plans for joint activities at international events, including the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. The two sides have promised to hold working-level talks at least once a month to facilitate their agreement. The two Koreas exchanged information on foreign boats fishing illegally around their de facto maritime border, the northern limit line in the West Sea. The communication took place through the inter-Korean military communication line at around 9 a.m. today local time. It's the first such exchange in 10 years, according to Seoul's defense ministry. Along with seizing all hostile acts towards each other starting November 1st, Friday's move is aimed at preventing any accidental clashes along the NLL. While the two Koreas have been drawing down weapons along the border this morning, Seoul's defense ministry confirmed that Pyongyang has not closed one of its 4 gun ports near the maritime border. The ministry sent a message to the regime asking to close it. According to an official from the nation's defense ministry, North Korea responded, saying that the matter will be dealt with after it's reported to higher authorities. The two Koreas agreed in September to cease all hostile acts on land, sea, and air starting November 1st. That includes covering up artillery guns and closing all gun ports near the sea border. But as of Thursday, of the North's 4 gun ports near Yeonpyeong-do Island, 1 was closed, 1 was open, and the other 2 were hidden from sight due to vegetation. This weekend, a local civic group is holding a joint event with its counterpart across the border to call for a faithful implementation of the September Summit Agreement. Seoul and Pyongyang's members of the Korean Council for Reconciliation and Cooperation will be gathering at the North's Mount Geumgang for the event. The nation's unification ministry approved their visit on Thursday. The group held their last joint event a decade ago. The delegation of around 300 people, including journalists and support staff, will be traveling north together. On Thursday, the United Nations First Committee passed 3 resolutions that call for North Korea's denuclearization. Motioned by Australia, the resolutions condemn the regime's nuclear tests and call for Pyongyang's complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization. It also demands North Korea comply with UN Security Council resolutions and emphasizes the need for diplomatic efforts on the nuclear issue. 2 Japan-sponsored resolutions urging the communist states' total elimination of nuclear arms and for a nuclear-free society were also passed. South Korea voted in favor of Australia's motion but abstained from Japan's as they were not in line with Seoul's interests. Humanitarian aid activists held a series of meetings to discuss ways to help out North Korea. As a result of the event in Seoul, the participants demanded opening financial transaction channel with North Korea. Kan Young-woo has more on what the international conference produced.
Humanitarian aid activists said Friday that United Nations agencies, international organizations, and non-governmental institutions should be allowed to open at least one channel for financial transactions with Pyongyang. After an international conference they attended in Seoul for the last 2 days, the activists released a joint statement at a press conference on Friday, demanding that stable remittances should be granted to help aid organizations operate in the north. The U.S. Treasury Department has recently issued a warning against financial transactions with North Korea. Washington also has asked South Korean banks to comply with the sanctions on Pyongyang. According to the head of the Korean Sharing Movement, Kang Young-sik, whose organization helped put the Seoul conference together, Friday's joint statement is basically asking the United States to permit the opening of a financial transaction account for North Korea aid. The activists also called for the UN and member countries to act so that aid can continue in the north and so that supplies are delivered in time and aid workers can get in. Meanwhile, they urged Pyongyang to be transparent and accountable when it comes to receiving aid. About 80 officials from local and foreign governments and non-governmental organizations attended the conference, which was co-hosted by the Korean Sharing Movement, Gyeonggi-do Province, and the Korean office of Germany's Friedrich Ebert Foundation. Kan Young-woo, Arirang News.
Sexual abuse by high-ranking officials appears to be widespread in North Korea. This is according to a recent report by a global human rights organization. Kim Mo-kyun provides a closer look into the matter.
Sexual violence by high-ranking officials appears to be endemic in North Korea. That's according to a report released by the UN-based Human Rights Watch on Thursday. The 86-page report, which contains interviews and testimonies from North Korean women, claimed that unwanted sexual contact and sexual violence are so common under the regime that they are part of women's daily lives.
Many North Koreans told Human Rights Watch that when an official or a person in power picks a woman, she has no choice but to comply. She has to do whatever he demands, whether it's for sex, money, or other favors.
The Human Rights Watch said the North Korean government should acknowledge the problem of sexual violence, ensure that police, prosecutors, and courts treat sexual violence as a crime, and promptly investigate and prosecute allegations when appropriate. North Korea strongly rejected the report, calling the allegations trite and fictitious. The North Korean delegation to the UN in Geneva issued a statement the following day, which said that the report is a futile attempt by some dishonest and hostile forces who feel uneasy with the ongoing trend towards peace, reconciliation, prosperity, and cooperation on the Korean peninsula. Kim Mo-kyun, Arirang News.
The South Korean government will inspect more than 1,450 public institutions as part of efforts to root out unfair employment practices. The government launched a committee on Friday to examine new hires and promotions of irregular workers to regular positions over the past 5 years. The committee will carry out its investigation from November 6th until January 31st and will conduct similar investigations each year. If unfair practices are detected, the committee can request disciplinary measures, penalties, or the cancellation of employment of those involved, and can also ask the prosecution to investigate further. South Korea may face increased financial market volatility in the near future, a point highlighted by the chief of the nation's central bank during a financial council meeting held just days after Seoul's main stock index marked the biggest on-month dip of the decade. Ko Rini shares with us his remarks.
Speaking at a financial council meeting on Friday, Bank of Korea Governor Lee Ju-yeol said the country might face increased financial market volatility due to high uncertainties abroad. Governor Lee met with local bank heads in Seoul and said the central bank will closely monitor the financial situations in foreign countries and cooperate with the South Korean government if necessary. He mentioned the recent activity on the local benchmark KOSPI, which showed a positive turnaround this week after falling by almost 14% in October, its largest on-month decline since 2008. October was a brutal month for investors around the world as all major indices on Wall Street fell due to fears over slowing growth, trade wars, and higher interest rates. The Nasdaq tumbled around 9% in October, the biggest monthly drop in a decade. Although the pain spread to overseas markets, including South Korea, Governor Lee stressed the market movement was different to past financial jitters because interest rate and currency fluctuations were limited. He said South Korea continues to log a current account surplus and foreign investors' confidence in the South Korean economy remains strong. Meanwhile, the participants also discussed ways to deal with uncertainties in the domestic and foreign business environments. They plan to closely monitor the financial situations of small and medium-sized companies and come up with solutions for capital shortages, such as giving extensions on loans. Ko Rini, Arirang News.
The nation's online spending went up again in September. Koreans spent over $8 billion on such purchases for the third straight month. Kim Hae-sung breaks down the digits for us.
Internet purchases in Korea hit $8.1 billion in September, up 15% on year to top the $8 billion mark for 3 months in a row. Statistics Korea attributed the rise to increased demand for food and cosmetics. Food service transactions went up more than 80% on year in September as more Koreans used mobile apps for food delivery and more people purchased food and beverages during Korea's traditional Chuseok holiday. Cosmetics goods purchases also went up near 20% on year. Mobile transactions hit $5 billion in September, up 24% on year, accounting for over 60% of the total online shopping purchases. At the same time, direct purchases of foreign products online hit $622 million, up near 36% on year, and the highest figure since Statistics Korea began recording online shopping data in 2014. Fashion items and clothes were the most popular overseas goods for Korean online shoppers, followed by food and beverages, home appliances, and electronic devices. The United States was the #1 seller, followed by Europe, China, and Japan. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
South Korea's benchmark index inched up on Friday after a phone call between the leaders of the U.S. and China raised hopes of a thaw in trade tension. The KOSPI closed at 2096, up more than 3.5% from the previous session. It's the sharpest daily percentage increase since December 2011. Analysts say stocks jumped on hopes of a breakthrough in the two superpowers' tariff war and on reports that the UK and EU are making progress on a Brexit deal over financial services. Seoul's tech-heavy KOSDAQ closed at around 690 points, rising more than 5% from the previous session. U.S. stocks also went up for a third straight session on Thursday. U.S. President Donald Trump claims to have held a long and very good phone conversation with Chinese President Xi Jinping on their current trade spat. America's commander-in-chief also mentioned the duo touched on North Korea as well. Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
A glimmer of hope for a thaw in the trade dispute between the world's two biggest economies. President Trump took to Twitter on Thursday, saying he had a long and very good conversation with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. He added they discussed many subjects with a heavy emphasis on trade. With the G20 summit to be held in Argentina this month, the two leaders are expected to meet on the sidelines. While watchers don't expect any major breakthrough, President Trump said the talks were moving along nicely. After the phone call, President Xi said he and Trump hope to expand trade cooperation, adding they would promote a plan that the two sides can accept to reach a consensus on the current trade issue. The two countries have already imposed tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars of each other's goods. President Trump has also threatened to slap tariffs on the remainder of China's $500 billion+ exports to the U.S. Trump's economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, says the administration will be holding off on further tariffs on China and may scale back existing ones if talks on a new trade relationship are successful. While Kudlow declined to provide details on the Trump-Xi phone discussion, he said there was a very positive tone between the two leaders. President Trump's mention of a good discussion on North Korea is also being viewed as positive in South Korea, but no further information was available on what the two leaders discussed on that front. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Over in New York, more than 3,000 Google employees held demonstrations in a city park, and dozens of Google employees marched along sidewalks in Dublin, while in Zurich, thousands poured out of office buildings to chant outside. Won Jung-hwan explains what's driving them to protest against the tech titan.
From Tokyo to San Francisco, thousands of Google employees walked out of work on Thursday at 11:10 a.m. local time to protest sexual misconduct inside the company. Many were holding signs with slogans expressing frustration at how their workplace has turned a blind eye to sexual harassment and discrimination. The protests were prompted by an article in the New York Times last week that revealed Google had paid $90 million in an exit package to Android creator Andy Rubin, who left the company in 2014. This began a turbulent week for Google, as it had previously claimed that none of the 48 people it had fired for sexual harassment over the last 2 years had received an exit package. Google employees around the world have come out to ask for a real change this time.
I think this was, the $90 million straw that broke the camel's back, to be honest. But there are so many stories that we've heard for so long, and it's time for action and change, real change. That's why we're calling this, the movement for real change.
The truth still matters to people. And then if the truth is not recognized by those in leadership positions, that they should figure out a way to find that truth for themselves, and we will tell them for them as well.
I'm walking out along with other colleagues in support of anyone in any workplace who has been harassed, and to ensure that perpetrators are not protected and not rewarded.
While the walkout lasted just for one day, the employees' anger will continue to smolder until they see a clear change in the way such harassment cases are handled. Won Jung-hwan, Arirang News.
Shifting our focus to a different story now, Apple fans in the nation were able to get their hands on the latest iPhone series starting this morning. In Seoul, dozens braved the cold November weather and waited outside for hours to snap up the very expensive gadgets. Our Park Ki-jun was at the opening event to check them out and hear from the early adopters.
Just as the clock struck midnight on Friday, customers were able to get their hands on Apple's latest iPhone series. As South Korea was not one of the initial launch countries, it was a longer and much more difficult wait.
I've been looking forward to the release, and I came here right after work. I've been waiting for around 5.5 hours.
I'm getting the iPhone 10 for my son to keep a promise I made a year ago. It's going to be a surprise gift.
And here it is, Apple's long-awaited new iPhone series, the iPhone XS, the iPhone XS Max, and the iPhone XR. It looks quite similar to the iPhone X, but of course, it comes with some major upgrades. The most distinct difference is the display, both in size and resolution. The camera also has a new feature called depth control, which allows users to adjust the background in portrait mode shots. And not to mention a faster and more accurate Face ID, boosted CPU, and longer battery life. The customers overall appear to have a good impression of the latest series.
I love it. The other iPhone XR colors were pretty too, but I got the white one just like I'd planned. I want to hurry home and try it out.
The screen is a lot bigger, making it easier on my eyes. The phone is also lighter than I expected, so it's quite comfortable to use.
Also available now is the Apple Watch Series 4, which boasts a 35% larger display and smarter health monitoring compared to the previous model. Despite the high price tags, with the 512GB iPhone XS Max costing more than $1,700, pre-orders for the newest series have slightly exceeded that of the iPhone X, once again demonstrating Apple users' loyalty to the brand. Park Ki-jun, Arirang News.
Turning to the world of sports now, South Korea made it to the 2018 Asian Football Confederation Under-19 Championship Finals. The Young Taekwondo Warriors defeated Qatar 3-1 in the semis at the Pakansari Stadium in Indonesia on Thursday. It's the first time since 2012 that Seoul's squad played for the rights to the championship trophy. The boys will take on Saudi Arabia for the final showdown at the Pakansari Stadium on Sunday. As the end of this season approaches, people across the nation started making kimchi to prepare for the winter. The 5th Seoul Kimchi Festival is taking place this weekend to give visitors the chance to taste Korea's unique flavor. Yoon Jung-min provides a glimpse of what to expect.
Geumgang is the unique Korean culture of making and sharing kimchi, the traditional fermented food made of salted vegetables with a variety of seasonings. Koreans traditionally make large amounts of kimchi in late autumn to prepare for the winter. The Geumgang culture brings families and neighbors together as making a large amount of kimchi requires cooperation. Geumgang was listed as a UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage of Humanity in 2013. To celebrate Geumgang, the 5th Seoul Kimchi Festival kicked off at Seoul Plaza on Friday. During the 3-day festival, more than 6,000 people will make 165 tons of kimchi to donate to neighbors in need.
Seoul Plaza, a public area right in the heart of the capital, has been turned into an outdoor factory mass-producing kimchi.
The weather is getting chilly, but the hearts of the participants are warm as they prepare the food together and share it with their neighbors.
I am very happy because it is very, very interesting for me to eat. It is very, very cheerful for us.
On the other side of the plaza is an exhibition featuring 100 kinds of kimchi. Visitors can see, smell, and taste traditional modern kimchi as well as North Korean varieties.
People only know about kimchi made of cabbages such as pogi kimchi, but in fact, there are hundreds of kinds of kimchi. I planned this exhibition to let citizens see and enjoy them.
The Seoul Kimchi Festival invites anyone who wishes to get a taste of Korea's unique flavor and experience Geumgang culture. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, conditions were actually quite mild today.
That's right, Daniel. Finally, our daytime highs bounced back to the seasonal averages, and in some regions, even higher. But daily lows are still forcing us to shiver, so if you are planning a night out on Friday, watch out for that wide temperature drops. Now, tomorrow will be a good day to appreciate the pleasant autumn weather. Now, wherever you are in the East Asia, since it will be under clear and sunny skies. Now, there will be patches of mist or fog in the morning as well. Seoul starts off at 6 degrees Celsius, while Busan and Jeju begins the day at 10 and 11 degrees respectively. And with plenty of sunshine, Seoul tops out to 17 degrees, while Daegu and Gyeongju rises to 18 and 20 degrees. Now, lots of sunshine and cool breeze will set the mood for any outdoor activities during the weekend. However, dry conditions will make it easier for fires to break out, so please take all necessary precautions. And the eastern regions of Gyeongju province could be getting some relief next week with some rounds of showers. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
Time to wrap up tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Thank you for watching. Have an incredible weekend.